The names in the beam. Virginia Hartley did not learn to count the way other children did. She did not count apples or coins or the fingers on her hands. She counted names. Every night before sleep, she whispered them softly into the dark. Ruth, Samuel, Eli, Mary, Thomas. Each name was carved into the wooden beam above her bedroom window. The letters were small and careful, etched with the tip of her mother's sewing scissors. By the time Virginia was 8 years old, there were 12 names. By 10, 17 names. By 12, 24. Every name belonged to a child who had lived at Hartley Plantation. Every name belonged to a child who vanished at the age of 12. And no one spoke about it. By the summer of 1851, when Virginia turned 17, 43 names filled the beam. 43 children who arrived as infants or toddlers. 43 children who worked and learned and grew. 43 children who simply ceased to exist. No sale records. No shipping notices. No advertisements in the Richmond papers. No explanation in her father's perfectly kept ledgers. Just gone. Before we begin this dark journey into one of the most disturbing mysteries of antebellum Virginia, make sure you subscribe to the channel, share this story with someone who loves historical mysteries, and leave a comment telling me what state you are listening from. These stories deserve to be heard from beginning to end. Now let us return to Hartley Plantation and the girl who refused to forget. Virginia first noticed something was wrong when she was 7 years old. She often played near the kitchen gardens where the younger enslaved children worked. It was one of the few places she was allowed without constant supervision. That was where she met Ruth. Ruth was 11, quick with her hands and quicker with her smile. She showed Virginia how to braid sweetgrass into neat patterns, twisting and weaving until the grass bent like it was alive. They met early in the mornings when dew clung to the tobacco leaves and the air smelled fresh and green. Ruth laughed easily. She dreamed openly. She said she wanted to travel someday, though Virginia did not understand how that could ever happen. Then one Tuesday morning in June, Ruth did not come. Virginia waited in the garden as the sun climbed higher. The dew disappeared. The heat settled in. Ruth never arrived. Virginia asked Ruth's mother, who turned away so fast her skirt spun. She asked the cook, who muttered that the child had been sent on and refused to meet her eyes. That night at supper, Virginia asked her father, "Father, where did Ruth go?" The room fell silent. Thomas Hartley looked at his daughter with irritation, not anger. Children should not interrupt their elders. Ruth has been sold to a family in Tennessee. That is all you need to know. But Virginia knew that was a lie. 2 days earlier she had brought her father tea in his study. His brown leather ledger was open on the desk. She had seen Ruth's name written neatly in his hand. Next to it was not a sale price. Not a destination. Just one word. Removed. That night Virginia carved Ruth's name into the beam above her window. She did not fully understand why. She only knew someone had to remember. Over the next 10 years, she carved 42 more. Hartley Plantation sat in Tidewater, Virginia, 20 miles west of Richmond. 300 acres of land passed down since 1784. White columns. A federal-style house. 60 enslaved people who kept everything running. Virginia's father, Thomas Hartley, was known as a careful man. He believed in order. He believed in records. He believed everything had a place and a value. He kept 3 ledgers. One for crops and tools. One for household expenses. And one kept locked in his desk drawer. The brown ledger. It recorded what he called human inventory. Virginia had seen it many times. Names, ages, values, notes written with cold precision. What disturbed her was not that the children were listed. It was that they vanished from the records entirely. No sale, no death, just removed. By 15, Virginia began sneaking into her father's study. She taught herself to pick the lock using a hat pin. She memorized the patterns. She noticed something else too. Every few months her father traveled to Richmond alone. No wagons. No announcements. No explanations. Days later a new child would appear. Always between 3 and 5 years old. Always described as healthy or intelligent. They were fed better, worked lighter tasks, and most strangely of all, they were taught to read and write. Teaching enslaved people to read was illegal after 1831. But Thomas Hartley ignored the law. An elderly widow named Mrs. Porter came twice a week. She taught letters, numbers, basic arithmetic. Virginia asked her father about it once. He told her some investments required preparation. That was the night Virginia understood something terrible was happening. Something planned, something hidden. And as she stared at the beam above her window, filled with names no one else dared speak, she realized the truth was not only buried in ledgers. It was carved into the walls of her own home. In part 2, Virginia begins asking the wrong questions and someone notices. If you want the full story, subscribe now, share this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Virginia should stop or keep digging? Because some secrets do not want to stay buried. Part 2. The Building in the Woods. Virginia Hartley learned a terrible truth that morning. Some secrets are not hidden because they are hard to find. They are hidden because once you see them, you can never unsee them. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe, share this story, and leave a comment below. These chapters only grow darker, and you will want to hear every part. Now let us return to the woods outside Richmond. Virginia pressed her back against the rough wooden wall of the building, barely breathing. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure it would give her away. Inside, her father was speaking about a child as if he were livestock. $800. No records. No trail. As far as the world is concerned, this child never existed. Virginia felt sick. She peeked through the narrow crack of the half-open door. The interior was dim, lit only by thin shafts of light slipping through gaps in the boards. The smell hit her first. Damp wood, old hay, and underneath it, something sharp and metallic that made her stomach twist. She saw her father standing beside another man. The stranger was tall and thin, dressed in a dark coat unsuited for the heat, his hair slicked flat against his skull. He looked impatient, tapping a riding crop against his boot. Between them stood a boy. He could not have been more than 12. His clothes were clean but worn. His hands were tied in front of him with a length of rope. He stood straight, chin lifted, eyes calm in a way that broke Virginia's heart. She recognized him. His name was Samuel. She had carved it into the beam above her window just 3 weeks earlier. Samuel looked at her father and spoke clearly. "Sir, you said this was a test. You said if I did well, I would be rewarded." The stranger laughed softly. "That depends on how you define reward." Thomas Hartley did not look at the boy. He handed the stranger a folded paper. The boy's handwriting sample, arithmetic tests, reading passages. "Excellent work," the stranger said. "Very impressive. You train them well, Hartley." Virginia's hands shook. Them. As if there were many. As if Samuel were only one of dozens. "Where are the others?" the stranger asked casually. "The ones from last quarter." Delivered as agreed, Thomas Hartley replied. "Norfolk, Savannah, New Orleans." Each buyer satisfied. Satisfied. Virginia bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. The stranger walked slowly around Samuel, inspecting him like an animal at market. Samuel followed him with his eyes, still calm, still trusting. He had been taught to obey, to believe. "I hear Boston has begun making inquiries," the stranger said. "Educated tastes are spreading northward. Some of them want older specimens now. 14, even 15. Thomas Hartley shook his head. 12 is ideal. Young enough to be shaped. Old enough to understand. Any older and they begin to resist." Virginia felt the world tilt. Shaped. Understand. The stranger smiled. "Very well. I will take him." Samuel's eyes flicked to her father. "Sir," he said softly. "Am I being sent to another plantation?" Thomas Hartley finally looked at him. His face was blank. "You are being sent where you will be useful." Samuel nodded. "Thank you, sir." Virginia almost screamed. Coins clinked. A handshake. Business concluded. The stranger took Samuel by the arm and guided him toward a side door Virginia had not noticed. Samuel did not struggle. He did not cry. He trusted the man who had taught him to read. As the door closed behind them, Virginia staggered back, pressing her hand to her chest. Her lungs burned. Her vision blurred. She understood now. The children were not being sold to farms. They were being sold to men who wanted something else. Something monstrous. Virginia fled into the woods, moving blindly, branches scratching her arms, roots catching her skirts. She did not stop until her lungs screamed and tears streamed down her face. She found Juniper where she had tied her, mounted with shaking hands, and rode hard for home. She arrived long before her father. Her mother asked no questions when Virginia said she felt unwell and retired to her room. Virginia locked the door and sank to the floor beneath the beam. She stared at the names. 43. Not removed. Murdered. That night, Virginia added another name. Samuel. But this time, she carved something else beside it. A small mark. A promise. By the next morning, Virginia Hartley knew 3 things with absolute certainty. Her father was a monster. The law would not help her. And if she did nothing, more children would disappear. In Part 3, Virginia takes her first dangerous step towards stopping the trade, and someone begins to watch her closely. If this story has you hooked, subscribe now, share it with a friend, and leave a comment. Do you think Virginia can survive going up against her own father? Because the beam above her window is running out of space. Part 3. The Secret Alliance. Virginia Hartley had never felt fear like this before. Not the ordinary kind that comes from a thunderstorm or a loose horse. This was fear that ran bone deep, the kind that twists your stomach and leaves your hands trembling for hours. She had seen what her father was capable of, and now she understood that the danger was far closer than anyone else suspected. Before we continue, hit subscribe, share this story with someone who loves mysteries, and leave a comment below. You will want to hear how Virginia begins to fight back against a secret that has haunted her family for generations. It started the night Virginia followed her father into the woods. She had seen Samuel led into the closed wagon, locked in as if he were cargo, sold to men who kept no records and left no trace. The words she had heard, more satisfying when they understand, echoed in her mind. What was being done to these children? Virginia could not stop thinking about it. She could not sleep. She could not eat. She could not pretend she did not know. For 3 weeks, she moved through her daily life as if in a fog. She helped her mother supervise the house servants. She worked on embroidery. She read in the parlor and attended church. But her mind was elsewhere. She saw Samuel's confused face. She heard the thin man's words. She pictured the locked wagon and the unknown roads beyond the woods. She had to act. She started quietly, listening. Plantation life had its routines, and Virginia had learned to watch and hear without being noticed. The older women in the quarters whispered among themselves. They knew what happened to the children, though they could not speak openly. They had seen it for decades. They had taught their own children to accept it, because resistance brought danger. Virginia learned everything she could. She memorized the patterns, the timing of her father's trips, the children selected for education, and the routes of the wagons. Then, one night, she did something she had never done before. She went to the quarters alone. It was late. The sun had been down for hours, and the heat of the day had faded into a heavy humidity. She knocked softly on a cabin door near the edge of the quarters. A woman named Dinah answered. Dinah worked in the kitchen and had a son named Marcus, 11 years old. Marcus would turn 12 in March. Virginia's voice shook. I need to talk to you. It's about Marcus. Dinah's face went carefully blank. She stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind her. The other children would have been listening. She looked around. What about Marcus? He turns 12 soon, doesn't he? Virginia nodded. I know what happens. I followed my father. I saw where they take them. I know why there are no records. Dinah's eyes widened. Miss Virginia, you can't talk about this. I want to stop it, Virginia said. I don't know how yet, but I can't watch another child disappear. Don't you want to save him? Dinah's face softened. She pressed her hands together, jaw tight. He's my son, my baby, but wanting and doing are different things. You're talking about going against your own father, she whispered. You're 17 and a woman besides. Nobody is going to listen to you. And if your father finds out you're planning something, he'd send you away. Maybe worse. Virginia swallowed. Maybe, she said, but I have to try. Will you help me? Dinah hesitated, looking around the darkened yard as if the shadows themselves might report her words. Finally, she said, very quietly, what do you need? Over the next several weeks, an unlikely alliance formed. Virginia and Dinah spoke in whispers, in stolen moments when no one else was around. Dinah shared what she knew. She had been on the plantation for decades. She knew the routes, the buyers, the schedules. She knew which children were chosen and why. They were taught to read and write, given better food, lighter work, and then taken before their 13th birthdays. Virginia listened, memorized, and took notes in a small journal hidden under the loose floorboard beneath her bed. They plotted carefully. They could not be caught. One mistake would mean the loss of their lives or the life of the child they tried to save. Dinah whispered about the older women who had seen it all. They could help. The younger children in the quarters could be taught to stay quiet and report what they saw without raising suspicion. Virginia and Dinah began to map the roads, the hidden paths, the secret wagons, and the buildings in the woods. They tried to understand the scope of the operation. How many children? How long had it been going on? How far were they sent? All of this had to be learned quietly. Every visit to the quarters had to appear casual. Every question had to be disguised as curiosity. But Virginia had another secret weapon. She was clever. She was fearless. And more than anything, she was determined. She had seen Samuel. She had heard the words that made her stomach turn. She had seen what happened to children when no one was looking. She could not unsee it. She could not ignore it. She would not. In Part 4, Virginia and Dinah take their first dangerous steps to gather evidence. The plan is risky, the hours long, and the stakes higher than they have ever imagined. If you are ready to follow Virginia on her journey, subscribe now, share this story, and leave a comment. Would you have the courage to stand against your own father to save an innocent child? Because the next step could be the most dangerous yet. Part 4. The First Steps. Virginia Hartley had never felt more alive and terrified at the same time. The knowledge she carried was a heavy burden, but it was also a spark. She had seen Samuel taken in that hidden wagon, heard the words that made her blood run cold, and realized she could no longer stand by. It was time to act. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe, share this story with someone who loves historical mysteries, and leave a comment below. You will not want to miss the moment Virginia takes her first dangerous steps to save the children. That evening, Virginia crept quietly from her room to the quarters. Dinah was waiting, crouched in the shadows near a cooking fire. Virginia approached carefully. She whispered, I have everything I have learned written down. The roads, the times, the buildings. I want to start gathering proof. Dinah nodded slowly. We have to be careful. One mistake, and the children, or you, could disappear. She glanced toward the other cabins. We can start with the children in the kitchen garden. They see things. They notice when people arrive and leave. They can tell us when your father plans a trip. Virginia pulled out a small notebook she had hidden beneath her dress. She showed Dinah the pages, filled with careful writing. Every trip her father had made, every child who had been taken, every name carved into her beam. Dinah studied the notebook. You have an eye for details. Good. We will start small. Listen, watch, write. Do not let anyone see you taking notes. Not even me. They began at night, speaking in whispers, moving through the quarters when the older children were asleep. They taught the younger ones how to notice patterns without asking questions aloud. A child who saw a wagon hidden in the woods would tell Virginia or Dinah by describing a strange sound of wheels or a shadow on the path. It was slow work, but it began to build a picture. They discovered the routes her father used were not always the same. Sometimes he went west through the woods to Richmond. Sometimes he went south toward Petersburg. Sometimes he met buyers in small towns along rivers. The children were taken far beyond the county, sometimes hundreds of miles. No ledger entries, no papers, no proof they ever existed. Virginia was horrified. The operation was more organized than she had feared. It had been going on for decades. Generations of children had disappeared, and no one in her world dared speak of it. But she also felt hope. Dinah's courage gave her courage. The children's trust gave her purpose. One night, Dinah whispered a warning that sent a chill down Virginia's spine. The men who bought the children were careful. They demanded secrecy. They expected obedience. They would punish anyone who interfered. We have to move quietly, Dinah said. No one must know what we are doing. Your father has eyes everywhere. Even those who seem loyal to you might not be. Virginia nodded. She understood. The risk was immense, but the cost of doing nothing was greater. Over the following weeks, Virginia and Dinah expanded their surveillance. Virginia began recording the exact days and times her father made his trips. She watched the wagons, counted the horses, and noted the men who accompanied them. She memorized the faces of workers who helped load the children, and she learned which doors led to the hidden building in the woods. They also studied the children. Which ones were chosen for education, which ones received better food, which ones were taken next. They tried to determine the pattern. The age 12 mark was consistent. Always 12, never 13. Virginia began to feel the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Every child who was saved or lost depended on her memory, her courage, her ability to act at exactly the right moment. She practiced what she would do if she ever needed to intervene. She imagined riding through the woods to stop a wagon. She imagined confronting the buyers, or distracting her father long enough to free a child. Her hands shook as she rehearsed, but she did not stop. One evening, she noticed something new. Her father had left a ledger on his desk unlocked for the first time in years. Virginia's heart raced. Could this be the evidence she needed? Could she finally prove the full extent of his operation? She waited until he was in the fields, then slipped into the study. The brown leather ledger lay open. She traced the names with her finger. Removed, removed, removed. 43 children, each entry erased. And then she saw it. A faint pencil mark beside one name. It looked like a note, a location, or a date. She copied it carefully into her notebook. This might be the first clue to where the children went. Dinah was overjoyed. This was progress, she whispered. Progress we can use. But the danger was also increasing. Virginia noticed a stranger on the road near the plantation the next morning. A man she had never seen before. He watched her as she rode to the kitchen gardens. She felt his gaze, cold and sharp. She knew immediately he was connected to her father's work. She realized then that the world she was stepping into was bigger and darker than she had imagined. Her father's trade was not local. It stretched beyond the county, the state, perhaps even to other parts of the South. Virginia and Dinah had to be careful. One mistake could end everything. They continued their work in secret, whispering in the quarters, watching from the shadows, writing down every detail they could. And then, one afternoon, Dinah handed Virginia a small piece of folded paper. She had overheard something important, a name, a place, a date. It was the first solid lead they had ever received. Virginia felt a surge of hope and fear all at once. This could be their chance to intercept a shipment. This could be their chance to save a child. She tucked the paper into her dress. She knew the next days would be crucial. Virginia was no longer just observing. She was planning action. She was preparing to intervene. And she knew the cost could be her life. In Part 5, Virginia and Dinah take their first daring steps to confront the operation, and danger arrives in ways they never expected. If you are following Virginia's story, subscribe now, share this video with someone who loves historical mysteries, and leave a comment. Would you risk everything to save an innocent child? Because for Virginia Hartley, there is no turning back. If you want, I can immediately write Part 5, where Virginia and Dinah's first real action against her father's secret begins. It will be tense, suspenseful, and stay true to the horror of the story. Do you want me to do that next? Part 5. The first daring move. Virginia Hartley had made a decision. She could no longer be silent. She had seen what happened to Samuel. She had seen the wagon, the locked doors, the men who called children merchandise. And she had made a promise to herself and to Dinah. She would try to save the next child. Before we continue, subscribe, share this story with someone who loves historical mysteries, and leave a comment. The next moments will be dangerous, and you will not want to miss them. It was a warm morning in late June when Virginia put her plan into motion. She rose before sunrise, dressed in her dark blue riding clothes, and tied her bonnet tightly under her chin. Juniper, her loyal mare, whinnied softly as Virginia approached the stables. She whispered, "Today we do something," and felt a rush of fear and determination. Virginia and Dinah had spent weeks observing. They knew her father's patterns. They knew when he would take the children and which wagon he would use. Dinah had spoken to other workers quietly, learning every detail without arousing suspicion. Now it was time to act. They positioned themselves along the hidden path in the woods. Virginia stayed low, her dress brushing the leaf litter. Dinah had brought a bundle of rope and a small lantern to signal the arrival of the wagon. Virginia's hands shook, but she forced herself to remain calm. She could not afford to panic. Not now. The sound of hooves reached them before they could see the wagon. Her father emerged from the woods, followed by the thin man in the dark coat. A boy, no older than 12, was led between them. Virginia froze. It was Marcus, Dinah's son. He looked confused and a little frightened. He glanced toward the trees, toward the place where Virginia crouched, but did not see her. His small hands were bound. He had been given better clothes, and his hair was brushed neatly. He looked like a prize, as if someone had polished him for sale. Virginia swallowed hard. Dinah whispered, "Remember the plan. Stay quiet until the right moment." They had rehearsed this in their minds hundreds of times. Virginia would distract her father. Dinah would lead Marcus to safety. They had chosen a small cabin on the far edge of the plantation as a temporary hiding place. The wagon stopped. Her father unlocked the door and gestured for Marcus to climb in. The boy hesitated, looking at his father. "Sir," he whispered, "where are we going?" Thomas Hartley's eyes were cold. "You are being sent where you will be useful. Climb in." Virginia's stomach churned. She could not let this happen. Dinah whispered, "Now." Virginia stepped out from the trees, her voice steady despite her fear. "Father." Thomas Hartley turned. His eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, he did not recognize her. Virginia stepped closer. "Father, I need to speak with you about Marcus." The thin man raised an eyebrow. "This is highly irregular, Hartley." Virginia did not back down. She kept her gaze on her father, daring him to act. She had memorized every step, every phrase. Dinah slipped quietly to the side of the wagon, untying Marcus's hands as she went. The boy froze for a moment, uncertain, but Dinah whispered, "Now, come with me." Marcus climbed down silently and followed Dinah into the shadows. Thomas Hartley barked an order, but before he could move, Virginia stepped forward again. "Father, if you continue this, I will tell everyone. I have proof. I have notes. I know where every child goes." Her father's eyes flashed with anger. "Who put these ideas in your head?" Virginia swallowed the lump in her throat. "I have seen it. I have followed you. I have watched the wagons, the men, the ledgers. I will not stay silent." The thin man looked uneasy. He did not like children talking back. He glanced at Thomas Hartley, who was frowning now, a mix of rage and disbelief. Virginia took a deep breath. She could not stop now. Not with Marcus out of the wagon and disappearing into the trees. She ran forward, grabbing her father's ledger from the table that had been left unattended. "You cannot hide this forever," she shouted. "People will know. Buyers, authorities, anyone. This is wrong." Thomas Hartley took a step toward her, his face pale with anger. But the thin man intervened. "Stop," he said. "We do not want to harm the child." Virginia realized she had shocked them both. She had exposed the first crack in their operation. She and Dinah ran through the woods with Marcus, dodging roots and low branches. The boy's small hand fit tightly in Dinah's. Virginia held Juniper's reins, leading them to the hidden cabin she had prepared. They arrived safe, though breathless and exhausted. Virginia collapsed on the floor of the cabin, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on her. Dinah whispered, "You did it. You saved him." Virginia's hands trembled. "Yes," she said quietly. "But we are not done. Not yet." She knew this was only the beginning. Her father would search for Marcus. He would not forgive her. And the thin man would be watching. But for the first time, Virginia felt a flicker of hope. They had a chance to save at least one child. They had taken the first step. In Part 6, Virginia and Dinah's actions put them directly in her father's path, and the danger intensifies. Will Marcus be safe, or will the hidden network of buyers strike back? If you are following Virginia's story, subscribe now, share this video, and leave a comment. Do you think a 17-year-old girl can outsmart a man like Thomas Hartley? Because the next part will test everything she has learned, and the stakes have never been higher. I can continue immediately with Part 6, where the tension escalates and Thomas Hartley begins to suspect that someone is interfering with his operation. Do you want me to write Part 6 next? Part 6. The danger grows. Virginia Hartley could no longer ignore the danger. The first step had been taken. Marcus was safe, hidden in the small cabin on the edge of the plantation. But Thomas Hartley would not forget. Before we continue, hit subscribe, share this story with someone who loves historical mysteries, and leave a comment. You will not want to miss how Virginia faces the wrath of her own father and the growing threat surrounding the children. The morning after Marcus had been hidden, Virginia rose before sunrise as usual. She checked the cabin one last time, ensuring the boy had enough food and water, then returned to the main house. Her father was already at the breakfast table. His eyes met hers, sharp and calculating. Virginia felt a chill. She knew he suspected something. He spoke carefully, as if measuring his words. "Virginia," he said, "I hope you slept well." Virginia kept her voice steady. "Yes, father, thank you." Thomas Hartley's expression did not change, but Virginia could feel the tension in the room. He was a man used to control. He had ruled over this plantation, over every transaction, over every child and adult under his power. And now, someone had defied him. That someone was his daughter. Virginia spent the day in a careful routine, pretending everything was normal. She helped her mother in the house, supervised chores, and avoided raising suspicion. But her mind was racing. She needed a plan to protect Marcus and the other children. That evening, Dinah arrived at the back door of her room. She looked grim. "Virginia," she whispered, "he knows." Virginia froze. "What do you mean?" He was asking questions. One of the older kitchen girls overheard something about a missing child and mentioned it casually to a visiting overseer. "Thomas Hartley is beginning to notice patterns. He is asking about wagons, about routes, about children who do not return." Virginia's heart pounded. If her father discovered Marcus, the boy would be gone. They met in secret that night in the quarters. Dinah handed Virginia a small piece of paper. The overseer's name, the day he would inspect the children in the kitchen garden, the time he would leave. Virginia nodded. This was the moment. They had to act fast. Over the next several days, they moved cautiously. Marcus stayed hidden in the small cabin. Virginia watched her father closely. Every movement, every question, every ledger entry. She memorized his patterns. The thin man in the dark coat had returned to the plantation. He asked questions, too, looking for discrepancies. Virginia could see his sharp eyes scanning the yards, the quarters, the trees. One afternoon, she noticed him standing near the edge of the woods, waiting, observing. She whispered to Dinah, "He is watching." Dinah nodded. "We will need a distraction." They planned carefully. Dinah would lead Marcus to a hidden boat along the river at night. Virginia would ride past the main house to draw attention away from them. The night of the escape arrived. Virginia rode Juniper along a familiar path, pretending to check the boundary fences. The moon was low, casting silver light across the fields. She could hear the soft splash of water in the distance where Dinah carried Marcus to the boat. Her father and the thin man were inside the house, discussing business. Virginia stayed calm, but every step was tense. One wrong sound, one wrong move, and everything would be lost. From the riverbank, Dinah signaled Virginia. Marcus was safe, at least for now. Virginia exhaled slowly. They had done it. But the danger was far from over. Thomas Hartley was already planning his next inspection. He was suspicious. He was ruthless. He would not stop until he knew what had happened to the missing child. Virginia and Dinah realized they needed allies. Other workers, older women, anyone who had seen the children vanish. They began quietly recruiting, speaking in whispers, planning who could be trusted. Meanwhile, Marcus adapted quickly to his temporary hiding place. He was scared, but he understood he was being protected. Virginia visited him in secret, bringing food and comfort, and teaching him to stay quiet when anyone passed the cabin. Virginia also began keeping a detailed journal of the escape, Marcus's location, and her father's movements. She realized that this documentation could be the key to exposing the entire operation someday. But every day, the tension grew. Her father's questions became sharper. The thin man watched the woods more closely. Even a single mistake could undo weeks of careful planning. One night, as Virginia lay in bed, she thought about the other children. 43 names carved into her beam. 43 lives stolen. How many more would be taken if she failed? The answer terrified her. She could not fail. Not now, not ever. The next morning, she returned to the quarters. Dinah was already there, waiting. She whispered, "We have news. Another child is scheduled to leave." Virginia's heart sank. The clock was ticking. They would have to act quickly, before he was taken. In Part 7, Virginia and Dinah face the ultimate test. They must move faster than ever before, outsmarting men who have operated in secrecy for decades. Every decision carries consequences that could change their lives forever. If you are following Virginia's story, subscribe now, share this video with someone who loves historical mysteries, and leave a comment. Would you risk everything to save a child from a secret no one dares to speak of? Because in Part 7, the stakes will be higher than ever, and one misstep could be deadly. If you want, I can write part 7 next, where the suspense explodes and Virginia and Dinah attempt a dangerous rescue under extreme risk. Do you want me to continue with part 7 now? Part 7. The Dangerous Rescue. Virginia Hartley had never felt fear like this before. The night was heavy with heat and humidity, and the air seemed to press down on her chest as if the very world were trying to stop her. A child's life was at stake, and the seconds ticked away like gunshots. Before we continue, hit subscribe, share this story with someone who loves historical mysteries, and leave a comment. You will not want to miss the most dangerous night in Virginia Hartley's journey. Dinah and Virginia had spent days planning this moment. Marcus's escape had been successful, but another child, a girl named Lillian, was scheduled to be taken at midnight. Virginia studied her notes, memorizing every root, every tree, every shadow in the woods. She could see the hidden path clearly in her mind, the place where her father kept his wagons, the building where the children were held. She had never been more certain that every move would count. That evening, as the sky darkened to an inky black, Virginia rode Juniper toward the edge of the plantation. Dinah waited with the younger children hidden in the quarters, eyes wide in fear but trusting her completely. Virginia reached the hidden clearing first. The familiar building loomed in the moonlight. She saw the tall thin man standing outside, checking the locks on the wagon. Her father was inside, reviewing a ledger, oblivious to her presence. Dinah had prepared a distraction. A small fire, a signal that would draw the overseer's attention. Virginia signaled with a soft whistle. Dinah lit the fire and vanished into the shadows. The thin man immediately turned toward the glow. Virginia crept closer, her heart pounding, every sense alert. Inside the building, she could hear muffled cries. Lillian's voice. She peeked through a crack in the wooden wall and saw her father placing the girl into the wagon. Virginia's stomach clenched. She had to act now. Carefully, she led Juniper behind the trees, moving closer to the wagon. Dinah appeared from the shadows and whispered, "Now, we go." Virginia nodded. She slipped from the horse and crouched near the wagon. The thin man returned, frowning at the fire in the distance. Virginia's hand found a rope she had brought. Quickly, she looped it around the wagon's axle, careful to avoid making any noise. Dinah appeared at the back of the wagon, whispering to Lillian, encouraging her to climb down. The girl's small hands clutched Dinah's, her eyes wide with terror. "It will be okay," whispered Virginia. "We are taking you to safety." The thin man noticed movement. He turned sharply, but by then Dinah and Lillian had slipped behind the trees. Virginia stepped forward, keeping Juniper between herself and the man. He raised his hand to call her, but she whistled, and from the distance came the sound of a second fire. The distraction worked. The thin man ran to investigate. Virginia seized the moment. She untied the wagon, removed the latch, and pushed it slightly off the path to block anyone coming from the other side. Lillian ran with Dinah, followed by Virginia, moving as fast as they could through the thick woods. Branches tore at their clothes, roots caught their feet, and the sweat stung their eyes, but they did not stop. Virginia could hear her father shouting orders behind them, but the fire and darkness kept them concealed. She led them to the small cabin where Marcus waited. The children huddled together, breathing hard, scared but alive. For a moment, Virginia allowed herself a breath. They had done it. They had saved another child. But relief was brief. She knew her father would escalate. He would tighten security. He would suspect someone. And he would come for Marcus and Lillian. Virginia sat in the cabin, holding Marcus's hand, listening to Lillian's quiet sobs. Dinah whispered, "You were brave tonight. Brave enough to face your father and the men who buy these children like cattle." Virginia shook her head. "I am not brave, Dinah. I am terrified, but I cannot do nothing." They spent the night planning their next move. The escape had worked, but it had revealed a weakness in their approach. They could not keep the children hidden forever. They needed a long-term plan, a safe place far from the plantation, far from buyers, far from her father. Virginia thought about the network of rivers and roads she had observed over months of secret surveillance. She knew of sympathetic families who had quietly helped runaway slaves and children. She knew there might be allies willing to shelter Marcus and Lillian until they could be moved farther away. But every plan carried risk. One informant, one mistake, and all the children could be discovered. The next morning, Virginia returned to the main house as if nothing had happened. Her father did not speak of the night's events, but Virginia sensed the suspicion in his eyes. He was aware that something had gone wrong. The thin man did not return that day, but Virginia knew he would be back, watching, waiting. She spent hours in her room, writing detailed instructions for the children and Dinah, noting every possible escape route, every place to hide. She memorized her father's schedule, the time of each meal, each trip to the fields, each meeting in the study. Virginia realized this was no longer just about Marcus or Lillian. It was about all the children. 43 names carved into the beam above her window. She had to save them all. Her resolve hardened. She would not rest until every child was safe. In Part 8, Virginia and Dinah face their most dangerous challenge yet. Thomas Hartley begins to close in on their plans, and the shadows that have haunted the plantation for decades grow darker. If you are following Virginia's story, subscribe now, share this video, and leave a comment. Would you risk your life to save innocent children when everyone around you is silent? Because the next part will show just how far Virginia is willing to go, and the consequences of defying a man like Thomas Hartley. I can continue immediately with Part 8, where the tension escalates to life-threatening danger and Virginia must make a critical decision that could change everything. Do you want me to write Part 8 next? Part 8. The Trap Tightens. Virginia Hartley knew the walls were closing in. Every day, the plantation seemed smaller, every shadow more dangerous, and every glance from her father sharper than a knife. Before we continue, subscribe, share this story with someone who loves historical mysteries, and leave a comment. You will not want to miss how Virginia faces the ultimate test of courage and cunning. The success of rescuing Marcus and Lillian had brought a new urgency to Virginia's mind. She could feel it in every beat of her heart. Thomas Hartley was suspicious. He had noticed irregularities, a missing child, a distracted overseer, and a small fire in the woods. He had not yet confronted Virginia directly, but she could see the tension in his face, the way he watched her from across the breakfast table, the way he asked questions about Marcus and Lillian that seemed casual but were not. Virginia spent the day quietly observing. She noted the movements of every servant, the arrival of supplies, the travel of the wagons, the times her father left the house. Every detail mattered. Dinah visited at night with grim news. Another child, a boy named Elijah, was scheduled for removal the following week. Virginia felt her stomach tighten. The stakes had never been higher. They could not fail. The plan had to be perfect. They would use the river this time. A hidden cove she had discovered months earlier, barely wide enough for a small boat. From there, Elijah could be moved to a family sympathetic to their cause, a family who had quietly hidden children from cruel hands in the past. Virginia rehearsed the plan again and again in her mind. She would ride past the main house at dawn, drawing her father's attention. Dinah would guide Elijah to the river. The boat would wait, and together they would take him far from the plantation. But nothing went as smoothly as Virginia hoped. The night before the escape, she overheard her father in the study. Thomas Hartley was speaking to the thin man in the dark coat. "We cannot have any more mistakes," he said. "Someone is meddling, and I want answers." The thin man's voice was low but firm. "He will learn soon enough," he said. Thomas Hartley's hand slammed down on the ledger. "Make sure every child is accounted for. No exceptions." Virginia's heart raced. They had been discovered. The next morning, she saddled Juniper, hiding her fear behind a calm expression. She rode along the path near the edge of the fields, just as she had planned. Her father and the thin man were already watching, their eyes sharp. Dinah appeared at the quarters with Elijah, who was small and quiet, clutching a bundle of belongings. Virginia signaled that the coast was clear, but she could see her father's eyes narrowing. The thin man moved closer, inspecting the woods. Virginia's stomach twisted. One wrong move, one sound, and the escape would fail. Dinah and Elijah slipped into the shadows, moving as quickly as possible. Virginia led Juniper along the path, pretending to check fences, keeping her father's attention on herself. Suddenly, a branch snapped underfoot. Thomas Hartley's gaze shifted instantly. Virginia froze, her heart hammering. He called to the thin man, who began to move toward the edge of the woods. Virginia's mind raced. They had to act faster. She urged Juniper to move, galloping across the fields to draw attention, shouting as if a fence had collapsed. Her father's voice bellowed, "Stop her," the thin man shouted, but by the time they realized what was happening, Dinah and Elijah had vanished into the trees. Virginia rode back toward the hidden cove, anxiety and relief battling inside her. The river sparkled in the morning light, and the small boat rocked gently at the bank. Dinah helped Elijah into the boat, and Virginia followed. They rowed silently, the water cool and calm beneath them, carrying the boy farther from the plantation and farther from Thomas Hartley's grasp. But as they reached the bend in the river, Virginia froze. A shadow moved along the opposite bank. Her heart sank. It was the thin man. He had anticipated the river as an escape route. Virginia rode faster, trying to put distance between them, but the man was persistent. She could see the glint of metal in his hand. Dinah whispered, "Keep going, we cannot stop now." The river twisted, hiding them in the dense trees along the bank. They moved as silently as ghosts, the boy huddled between them. Virginia realized that this was the most dangerous night of her life. If the thin man caught them, all would be lost. Hours passed like this, the boat slipping through shadows and light, until finally, they reached a small inlet. A family waited, faces anxious but determined. They helped Elijah from the boat, whispering words of comfort and safety. Virginia felt her legs weaken. They had done it. Another child was safe. But the cost weighed heavily on her. She knew her father would intensify his search. The thin man would never forget. And the network of buyers was still out there, lurking, ready to snatch any child who appeared vulnerable. Virginia returned to the plantation alone, Juniper moving slowly beneath her. Her father was waiting, calm but with a dangerous edge. He said nothing about the day's events, but Virginia knew he suspected. She had crossed a line. The next moves would be even more perilous. In Part 9, Virginia and Dinah must face betrayal, suspicion, and the full force of Thomas Hartley's wrath. The shadow of danger grows larger, and every decision could be their last. If you are following Virginia's story, subscribe now, share this video, and leave a comment. Do you think courage and cleverness can outmatch cruelty and wealth? Because in Part 9, the stakes are higher than ever, and Virginia will have to risk everything to save the children she loves. I can continue immediately with Part 9, where the suspense reaches its peak and Thomas Hartley begins to strike back directly. Do you want me to write Part 9 next? Part 9. The Wrath of Thomas Hartley. Virginia Hartley had learned that fear could sharpen the mind, but it could also crush the spirit. Her father had begun to suspect. His eyes lingered longer than necessary at the breakfast table. His questions, casual in tone, carried hidden threats. Before we continue, hit subscribe, share this story with someone who loves historical mysteries, and leave a comment. You will not want to miss the moment when Virginia faces the full wrath of her father, a man who will stop at nothing to protect his secret. It started with small things. A ledger slightly out of place. An overseer asking about children who were supposed to be working in the fields. A thin man watching the woods with an intensity that made Virginia's stomach twist. Virginia knew it would not be long before her father acted directly. She could feel the danger closing in. The first confrontation came in the study. Thomas Hartley called her in under the pretense of reviewing the accounts. Virginia entered, her face calm but her heart pounding. Her father's eyes were sharp. He closed the ledger and looked at her. "Virginia," he said, "some children have gone missing. Can you explain this?" Virginia held her ground. "I do not know, father," she said evenly. Thomas Hartley's voice grew colder. "Do not lie to me. I have been hearing stories from reliable sources." Virginia swallowed. She could not tell him she had followed him, that she had seen the children loaded into wagons. She could not tell him about Marcus, about Lillian, about the river escape. Her mind raced. She needed a plan. She could not let him discover the children were safe, not yet. That night, she met with Dinah in the quarters. The older woman's face was pale. "He is asking questions," Dinah said. "We have to move faster." Virginia nodded. "We cannot wait. We must get more children out before he tightens security." They planned in whispers. A small group of children would be moved first, others later. The river remained the safest route, but they had to create diversions, false trails, and misdirection. Over the next several nights, Virginia and Dinah worked with a small network of trusted workers. Each child was given a code name, each route memorized, each hiding place prepared. The tension was unbearable, but the stakes were higher than ever. One night, Virginia observed her father in the woods near the hidden building. He carried a lantern, inspecting the paths, questioning the thin man in the dark coat. He was preparing for the next batch of children, tightening control, leaving fewer gaps to exploit. Virginia knew this would be the most dangerous escape yet. She could not afford mistakes. The night of the operation arrived. Virginia and Dinah moved the children quietly to the river. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth, the sound of frogs, and the whisper of water. As they approached the boat, a shadow fell across the bank. It was Thomas Hartley. Virginia froze, but Dinah whispered, "Keep going. We can do this." The children hesitated, but Virginia encouraged them. "We are almost there," she said. "Do not stop." Her father's face twisted with rage. He realized the deception. He raised his hand to call the thin man, but Virginia acted. She threw a small rock to the opposite side of the clearing. The sound echoed, drawing the man's attention. Dinah and the children slipped into the boat. Virginia followed last, pushing off into the river. The boat floated silently down the current, carrying the children away from the plantation, away from Thomas Hartley's grasp. The shadow of the man in the dark coat lingered, but the river swallowed them. Virginia knew they were not safe yet. The network of allies awaited downstream, ready to take the children further from danger. The journey was not over, but for the first time, she allowed herself a small sense of hope. Meanwhile, back at the plantation, Thomas Hartley seethed. He had been outwitted, at least for now. He would not forget this. He would intensify his searches, increase his guards, and make sure no child could disappear again without his knowledge. Virginia realized the war was far from over. She had faced her father's suspicion, outsmarted his men, and saved children from a fate worse than she could have imagined. But the cost was high. Every night was tense. Every sound in the dark made her jump. She knew Thomas Hartley would come for her, that he would try to uncover every secret she had, every hiding place, every ally. Dinah, Marcus, Lillian, and the other children were safe for now, but the danger was not gone. Virginia's mind was already planning the next steps. They needed a permanent solution, a way to remove the children from the reach of Thomas Hartley and the buyers forever. She also began documenting everything in detail, knowing that one day, the truth must be revealed. She wrote names, dates, routes, methods, and conversations in a hidden journal beneath the floorboards. The ledger of horror would not be forgotten, not if she could help it. In Part 10, the final chapter, Virginia will face the ultimate confrontation with her father and uncover the full extent of his secrets. The children's future, her own future, and the legacy of the plantation will hang in the balance. If you are following Virginia's story, subscribe now, share this video, and leave a comment. Would you risk everything to fight for justice when the world around you is silent and cruel? Because in Part 10, the truth comes to light, and Virginia's courage will be tested like never before. I can now write Part 10, the thrilling final part, where Virginia confronts her father and the full story of the children's fate is revealed. Do you want me to write Part 10 next? Part 10, The Reckoning. Virginia Hartley had spent years keeping secrets, watching, listening, planning, and fearing the day her father would uncover the truth. That day had come. Before we continue, hit subscribe, share this story with someone who loves historical mysteries, and leave a comment. The final chapter of Virginia Hartley's story will reveal the dark secrets of the Hartley plantation and the courage of one young woman who refused to look away. It began in the early hours of a summer morning. Virginia had been awake for hours, planning her final move. Marcus, Lillian, and the other children she and Dinah had managed to hide were safe for now, but the window was closing. Thomas Hartley had grown suspicious. He questioned the servants, inspected the buildings, and paced the plantation like a caged animal. Virginia knew he would act soon. She entered the study, pretending to be calm and collected. Her father was behind his desk. Ledger open, pen in hand. He looked up at her, eyes sharp and dangerous. "Virginia," he said, "something is going on here. Children are missing. You know something." Virginia took a deep breath. She could no longer hide the truth. "Father," she said quietly but firmly, "I know what you are doing. I have seen it. I have seen the children being taken, sold in secret, their lives destroyed." Thomas Hartley's face darkened. "You dare accuse me," he said. "You are a child. You know nothing about business, about property, about the world." Virginia's hands shook, but she held his gaze. "I know more than you think," she said. "I know what happens to the children when they are sold. I know the buyers, the places, the lies. I know that they are treated like merchandise." For the first time, Thomas Hartley looked unsure. His composure faltered, his hands gripping the ledger tightly. "You have no proof," he said. "No proof at all." Virginia reached beneath her dress and pulled out the journal she had kept hidden for years. Every name, every date, every observation meticulously recorded. She laid it on the desk. "This is proof," she said. "This is what you have done, what you have continued for decades." Her father stared at the pages, at the names carved into the beam, at the evidence of his own deeds. His face darkened with rage. "You will regret this," he said. "You are a Hartley. You will not betray your family." Virginia did not flinch. "I am a Hartley," she said, "but I am not you. I will not allow more children to suffer." Outside, the slaves and workers who had remained loyal to Virginia gathered quietly. Dinah and others emerged from the quarters, carrying children, guiding them toward the river, toward safety. They had planned for this moment. Thomas Hartley realized he had been outsmarted. He ran to intercept them, but Virginia anticipated his move. She blocked him, standing firm. "This stops now," she said. "The children are leaving, and there is nothing you can do." For the first time, the thin man in the dark coat looked uncertain. Thomas Hartley's empire of secrecy and control was crumbling. In the distance, the sound of horses and wagons approached. Virginia had sent word to allies, families who had helped runaways before. They arrived, ready to escort the children to permanent safety. Thomas Hartley was furious, but he was alone. Virginia's courage, her intelligence, and the loyalty of Dinah and the others had defeated him. The children boarded the wagons, their eyes wide but trusting. Virginia and Dinah guided them, giving instructions, reassuring them that they were finally free. Thomas Hartley tried to act, tried to regain control, but the workers, the neighbors, and the allies had surrounded him. His threats fell on deaf ears. The law, the public, and the network of helpers had been alerted. Virginia watched the last wagon disappear down the river, carrying Marcus and Lillian, carrying hope, carrying life. She felt a weight lift from her chest. When the dust settled, Thomas Hartley faced consequences. The secret ledger was discovered, the names recorded, and the buyers traced. Hartley was stripped of his holdings and brought to justice. The children were safe, cared for by families who would protect them and give them the childhood they had been denied. Virginia returned to the plantation one last time. She climbed to her room and looked at the beam above her window. 43 names carved into the wood. Each one remembered, each one honored. Her hand traced the letters lightly. They would never be forgotten. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but action in the face of it. She had risked everything, defied her father, and changed lives forever. Virginia Hartley's story spread beyond the plantation, a tale of bravery and justice. It inspired others to speak, to act, to fight for those who had no voice. And in the end, she knew that while darkness had existed on the Hartley plantation for decades, light had finally returned. The children were free, the truth was known, and a young woman's courage had changed the course of history. This concludes the story of Virginia Hartley and the dark secrets of the Hartley plantation. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe now, share this video with friends, and leave a comment. Tell us which part shocked you the most and which moment made you proud of Virginia. Because stories like hers remind us that courage, even in the darkest times, can make all the difference.